In this video, we are going to explain how our cultures and identities impact and are impacted by the fields of study that we choose to take.
We can express our identities through the different disciplines, and our studies of them can impact our beliefs and actions.
Our definition of culture is the general characteristics of any group of people, such as beliefs, religion, social norms, traditions, language, and values.
But first, a little more about ourselves. I'm Carlos, and I'm a mix of Venezuelan, Costa Rican, and Canadian culture, and have lived half of my life outside of Canada.
Hello, my name is Isabella, and I am of Canadian culture, integrated with a Romanian background.
Hello, I'm Sue. I am ethnically Chinese. I was raised in Canada, and my culture is a blend of both. We, as a multiculturalist school, see a variety of traditions, languages, and values, as well as their effects upon us.
One of the best ways to express yourself is through communication and verbal interaction. In our schools, we have language classes, each designed to not only teach us different languages, but to show us their cultures, which shows just how connected language and culture are. Also, based on our definition of culture, the languages the people of a culture speak is part of the culture itself.
Language also affects the way that we see the world and communicate with people. For example, speakers of the Hopi language see the world differently because they use solely the four cardinal directions. Because of this, studies have shown that they are less self-centered and think of themselves more as part of the world around them.
Language can also affect your cultural identity, since it is such an intrinsic part of culture. In my example, speaking Spanish and living in many Latin countries affected my own cultural identity by adapting my traditions and identity into a mix of many Latin cultures.
You can also express your identity and culture through language by speaking and communicating with other speakers of that language, creating a sense of community.
Another way that the study of language can affect culture is through the study of literature. Literature and written works have become an essential part of most cultures. For example, most of us will recognize classics such as William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, as well as more contemporary works such as J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter. Language is also an important part of many cultures with an oral tradition. Even cultures who pass down their stories through written text rely on language to do so, since text is a part of language. This is a way that we express our identity, and these stories and traditions also affect our knowledge and culture.
Our definition of science is essentially the study, exploration, and explanation of the structure and behaviors of the physical world based on observation, evidence, and experimentation.
Science is, as we mentioned, the study and explanation of the physical world, and myths are early attempts to explain natural phenomena. For example, we know lightning as the result of charge separation within the atmosphere, but the ancient Greeks explained lightning by attributing it to being the weapon of the god Zeus.
Science is a way that we express ourselves, but it also affects our own beliefs and identities. Most of us now do believe and practice science and see its effects on the world. We now know things that people 2,000 years ago never thought of, and these things have affected our identities.
For example, someone living in the Dark Ages in Europe would have little to no knowledge of scientific concepts like cells, atoms, the physics of motion, and many other similar things.
In our science classes, we learn about science and apply this new knowledge to ourselves. This changes us and forces us to see the bigger picture, expanding our understanding of who we are as people, a community, and as a species.
Science also has an effect on modern society by mixing scientific concepts into our culture until they are generally accepted as fact.
An example of this was when the Soviet government supported the work of scientist Lysenko because his theories aligned with Marxist belief. They did this in an attempt to solidify their beliefs in society by using science and integrating it into their culture.
Math allows us to express our culture by using it to make sense of the world and using data to analyze that world.
We can use graphs to express data and to help us analyze any patterns in the data. The knowledge of and usage of graphs themselves is also a part of our culture.
This graph displays to us the values that most Canadians hold. therefore showing the prominence of each set of values in the overall Canadian community. This is just one example of how math allows us to express our culture by using it to make sense of the world and using data to analyze that world.
This affects our culture because it changes the way we see data and use it in our day-to-day lives. Another example is using an abacus. This is an instrument typically used to calculate numbers in Chinese culture and is an example of how different cultures approach logical and mathematical problems.
This shows how different cultures have different teaching strategies that affect how a student learns specific concepts. This is important because how we learn different subjects will directly affect how we will approach problems in this field in the future, and most importantly, how we will teach future generations.
Social studies is considered to be various studies of human society, including but not limited to the studies of history, geography, economics, and anthropology.
Our own identities affect our perception of history. The perspective from which you view certain events affects how you perceive them, and might change how people approach things in the future, since we learn from our past. The War of 1812 is an example. The Americans think they won the war, but the Canadians think they won the war.
How we perceive past events affects our culture because it impacts how we will act in the future, and what different culture groups will learn from the events. Another aspect of social studies that affects our culture is geography.
The different geographical landscapes around the world drastically affect the behavior and culture of people living there.
An example of this is in the peoples of the north of Canada. Their lives and cultures are drastically different to ours, and this is simply because they must learn to study and adapt to their geography in order to survive in the cold climate.
This can also be said for every place around the world because of the diverse geological properties we all live in. All cultures are affected by their surrounding area, be it mountains, deserts, tundras, or rainforests. The lives of the people here are shaped by what they must do and behave like in their current conditions.
The subject matter that is perhaps the most connected with self-expression is the arts. You can often see the various stages and things the artist is going through within their art, and art is also a very important part of most cultures.
The arts are the various branches of human creative activity, including visual arts, music, dance, drama, and design.
People can express things like their emotions, identity, religious beliefs, and values through their art. Also, the subjects people choose to create their art on and how they choose to do it are heavily influenced by their culture, thoughts, and life experiences. For example, European music was predominantly religious for a long time, and non-religious music was less significant. This reflected the importance of religion in Europe at the time. These religious values were also expressed through paintings of religious figures like the painting inside the Sistine Chapel.
An example of this in school is in our art class. All our art that was done in that class was done with the goal of expressing our identity, interests, or emotion. Examples include our contes, which were meant to depict someone who had qualities we admired, and our sculptures, which were meant to convey a story or an emotion.
Art also influences the culture and identity of a person. People and cultures can be impacted by art. This can change them as a person or change the attitude of the time.
Our exploration of these ideas have led us to the conclusion that, despite what we may think, our personal identities and opinions do make an impact on the world. We have also learned how culture can shape the way we think and how learning affects our culture.
Because of this, we have become more aware of the world around us and will be more aware of the impact that our opinions and learning have on ourselves and on others. We also learned about how our core subjects can shape the way we act. This shows us the importance of school to the world and how it changes who we are and who we identify as.
Overall, we have a new perspective on learning and how our own personal identities affect the world around us. There are still many things that can be connected to this, and in the future, we hope to apply this new knowledge in our daily lives. And as we grow as students, we hope we will realize more related things, and this will teach us more creative ways of thinking.